Hello everyone and welcome to today's Green Business Fund webinar on employee engagement and behaviour change. Just before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items just so you know how to participate in today's webinar. You've joined the presentation listening on your computer speaker system by default, but if you prefer to join over the telephone, you can just select telephone in the audio pane and it will display the dial-in information if you prefer. Also, throughout the webinar, you'll have the opportunity to submit your questions to today's presenter just by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You can send your questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end. Okay, so I'd now like to introduce Hannah Chang from the Carbon Trust.
Thanks, Annie. Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah Chang. I'm a consultant for the Carbon Trust. I work in the business services team. Today I'll be presenting on employee engagement and behavior change for SMEs. I'll start out by introducing briefly about the Carbon Trust, what we do, our organization, and then I'll talk about how important it is to understand how people think before they act, or how people don't think before they act. And then I'll cover the fundamentals of employee engagement, followed by how it's being done in practice. And we're going to have some question and answer time, and afterwards we'll talk about Green Business Fund. Carbon Trust, we are a mission-driven organization, not for dividend organization. We were set up by the UK government back in 2001 as an expert organization to help the UK move to a low carbon economy. We were originally funded by the UK government, and since we've become a commercial organization. Everything we do relates to our mission, which is to accelerate the move to a sustainable low carbon economy. Broadly, we provide advice to governments, the public sector, and companies in the UK and internationally. We do much certification and footprinting work that looks at the impact of organizations and their products and services. And we also recognize organizations' progress in their low carbon journey through our certification scheme, the Carbon Trust Standard, and the footprinting label. We also have expertise in working in the renewable energy sector, and we are very strong in the wind energy and energy systems sectors. Globally, we have 180 people. We have offices in the UK. We are headquartered in London, and we have international offices in South Africa, China, Mexico, Brazil, and also we have presence in Washington, DC in the US. So moving on to trying to understand how people think. So how do people think? You always do cost-benefit analysis in your mind, and you need to see benefits. Cost and benefits can be different for each individual. You really need to find what makes people tick. For example, when we do behavior change, energy management and carbon reduction isn't really what people have in mind. When we worked with the police department on energy management, it was actually impossible to get them to turn off their computers and lights before leaving work. So we ran a focus group and learned that their focus was actually on security. So when the employees learned that, the police department people, when they learned that leaving computers on at night exposed them to security risks, they started turning off computers. Another example would be turning off fans. It's more effective to communicate that turning off fan is good for having quieter office than say turning off fans is good for energy saving. So essentially, you need to figure out what people are doing now, what needs to be done, and what their drivers are to change their behavior. How we behave is linked to how we think. However, we don't make decisions all in the same way, since we are driven by many different things. there has to be something that's related to each person. And how we make decisions is different. Essentially, our brain has two systems to make decisions, fast and slow. System 1 is characterized by fast decision making, and this involves decisions that might be habits or ones that we do without much thought. For example, walking to the office, adding 1 plus 1. We may also make them on a subconscious level, in which we rely on mental shortcuts or rule of thumbs. These types of decisions represent about 95% of our decision making on a day-to-day. Comparatively, System 2 thinking is slower, more logical, deliberate, and thoughtful, which is the case when you're buying a car. In this case, people need time to understand a rational case. So since we're working with two different systems when we are engaging employees on energy management issues, you should try to appeal to both systems, fast and slow. So what are the fundamentals of employee engagement? Employee engagement is defined as the extent to which employees put discretionary effort into their work, are committed to the organization, and feel passionate about their jobs. There is a connection between the two. You are more likely to put discretionary effort into your work if you're committed to the organization. When you talk about discretionary effort, you're talking about efforts for energy savings, cost savings, and carbon savings. If you're talking about commitment to the organization, you're talking about perceived virtue, group dynamics, and reputation. So how can you engage employees so that this will lead to energy, cost, and carbon savings while they feel good about being part of the organization? What are the tools you deploy to achieve these things? What we see very frequently is that often wrong tools are deployed. This is true in many organizations, including, the carbon trust standard bearers who've been putting time and effort into this area for many years. To get energy savings, people are deploying posters and stickers, and in other organizations, engineers are being asked to engage the employees. But you have to remember that the two areas, discretionary effort and commitment to the organizations, they're very different and require different skill sets. So just to cover briefly, why is employee engagement important and what does it require? So first of all, it's important because it helps meet targets on your energy, cost, and carbon. From the Carbon Trust experience, organizations are able to achieve 5 to 15% energy savings through better employee engagement. Cultural change explores the link between energy savings in the office and energy savings at home, which would again help meet your organizational targets. Thirdly, employee engagement requires low capital costs, as is the case for appointing green champions. If you have less than 10 people in the office, you probably don't need a green champion. But for bigger organizations, you need somebody to drive initiatives and be a point of contact. So what does it require? Well, you first have to identify who the key staff are. For example, who's currently responsible for energy and carbon management. Then identify key communication channels. These can be emails, newsletter, advice on the internet, whatever that you have available at the moment. It's essential to obtain senior management buy-in. This depends on the size of the organization, but people do look up to senior managers for this sort of engagement programs. And having open discussions with staff is a must. You have to have two-way discussions with staff to understand their behaviors first, and then design and run the program and receive their feedback so that you could incorporate that into the program. So essentially, it's a continuous loop. So when thinking about how to change behaviors through an employee engagement program, we have this thing called COM-B model, and this is a good framework to use. COM means capability, opportunity, and motivation. These are what is involved in doing and affecting a certain behavior. Capability. So this is about, do you have power to change? For example, office temperature. If employees are not able to change temperature, there isn't much they could do about saving energy from reducing heating or air conditioning. Opportunity. This is also more from the organization side. Do employees have opportunities to participate in a focus group or anything that would help reduce energy? Motivation. Do they want to change? What are the benefits of changing behavior? In the beginning of the webinar, I mentioned everyone does cost-benefit analysis when they're doing something or are asked to do something. I mentioned the example of a police department where everybody started turning off computers when they realized turning on computers overnight could expose them to security risks. We all respond to different things, and you really need to find out what people act. So the COM model, these are general concepts to change management. So just to give an example of recycling, well, to influence capability, you could label things clearly. When it comes to recycling, you could make it harder to put wrong items into the wrong bins by using the bins that have restrictive shapes on top. Another example would be you can make it easier to turn light on and off by clearly labeling them. You can influence opportunity by creating opportunities for employees to act on. For example, a cycle to work scheme reduces travel and the need for infrastructure such as car parks. Similarly, you could help facilitate carpools within your organization. You can also influence motivation. For example, placing printers further away from employees helps reduce paper consumption. Also, for example, in our Carbon Trust offices, we select print from our computers, and then once you are at the printer, you then have to select to print again, which gives another chance to think about whether printing this document is necessary. So how do we design an effective employee engagement program? Just want to walk you through some current trends in behavior change. So data visualization. So rather than communicating the performance of your building or your sustainability initiatives with numbers, you would use visuals that give emotional cues. A study at a university in Leicester looked at how people using the building reacted to information about the energy use of the building they're using. When the building was performing well, they would see a happy gorilla with a blue sky, but when the building was performing badly, they'd see an unhappy gorilla in gloomy surroundings. The study found that visual imagery that gives emotional cues can be more effective than words or numbers in getting building users to change their behavior. The use of happy and sad faces, which is more common and easier to replicate, relies on the same principles. The next up is rational choice, that being sustainable and doing the right thing, that it is the right thing to do. It makes sense to save energy. Societal change, that everyone needs to be on board, and focus on early education on sustainability. So those four are the current trends in behavior change. So whatever activities you undertake, you should try to sit them within an overall framework that's presented here and the process. First, I mentioned some of these earlier, but I'll just walk you through the steps that you could use. First, you start the process with research and planning. You start gathering data by speaking to your staff. From the beginning, you have to get the staff involved. You can't develop a behavior change program without having employees involved from the get-go. Surveys, focus groups, and workshops can be used to understand current behaviors and explore how they can be changed. You would also have to engage with the right people within your organization. Once you have done the initial research and planning, it's a test stage. You want to test the ideas you have gathered from your research. Think about the kind of communication channels you'll be using, and think about whether you need to customize your approach and language so that it speaks to different groups of people, depending on where they are in the organization. You should also think about how you would assess the impact of the program. Finally, once you have designed the program and have run it, you would have to assess the impact of the program, get feedback from the staff whether it's working. If it didn't work as you thought it would, find out why it didn't by speaking to the staff so that you could make improvement to the campaign. Remember that it's not a one-off, but an ongoing program, and it's a continuous loop of feedback. I'll discuss a bit more of some of these key points in the following slides. So in order to design and practice effective engagement program, first you have to think about what you are trying to achieve through the initiative. What are the desired goals of the initiative? Is that saving money, carbon? Is that more reputational, culture, compliance? And then think about what needs to happen in order to achieve the goals. There are a few things to consider. For example, what behaviors are causing the most, or what behaviors do you think are causing most waste towards that outcome, and how should that change? Once you have identified what needs to change, think about the goals and motivations of people who will have to change. So what are these people trying to achieve, and what do they care about in their office environment? To give an example, for a hospital, main driver is the patient benefit. When we helped an NHS hospital to design an energy-saving program, we highlighted the benefit of energy-saving behaviors to patients. So, for example, lighting accounts for 35% of the hospital's electricity usage. And we said, well, turning off lights when leaving a room will help reduce light pollution and help patients sleep. For the HVAC, that accounted for 25% of the electricity usage. The wording that we came up with was, closing doors behind you will help regulate room temperature for patient comfort, reduce noise, offer greater privacy, and improve patient safety. And for the office and small power equipment, that accounts for 10% of their electricity usage, the motto we came up with was, switching off equipment will help reduce excessive heat and noise and improve patient comfort as well as your own. You should also ask, can you change that behavior easily? Somebody came and said they would like to run a behavior change program on transport, but if you're in the middle of Wales, this would not be really possible. You could do car sharing, video conferencing, but you can't say to your employees to take public transport or cycle. Also, when you run the program matters. If it's summer, you can't run a behavior change campaign in heating, for example. And finally, as mentioned earlier, it's essential to think about who would need to be involved in order to achieve your goals. You have to have the right people lead the behavior change initiative. For example, when it comes to saving energy related to computer use, the IT department would have to be involved. Employee engagement should always be two-way communication, and you need your employees engaged from the beginning to the end. Once you receive feedback, you should incorporate that into the program and run the program again, as I mentioned earlier. So the slide has some real-life feedback we received from working with various organizations. Some of them I think are reasonable, but others are, quite a lot of asking actually. And keep in mind external behavior change consultants, such as the Carbon Trust do not have standardized poster or engagement toolkit that should work for any organization. One organization is so different from another. Generic materials wouldn't work for your organization, and you have to develop the tools that work for you based on the feedback you receive from your employees. A lot of people won't be motivated to act on climate change. When you are having discussions with your staff or developing engagement materials, there are a few things that you should think about. First, you should talk about the benefits to staff. Everyone has their primary role at work, which they're under pressure to deliver. And you have to make sure that your behavior change initiatives help staff achieve their objectives, not go against them. Also, develop wording on the behavior change initiative in terms that the organization will understand. To give the example of the hospital, what they came up with was ensure room temperatures don't go above 25 degrees to prevent germs from spreading. And also make it easy for people to change their behaviors. You could follow the example of hotels that leave simple instructions to help their guests save energy and water. When you're doing focus groups, you often have a very few vocal people, so that you should do a good job facilitating the discussion. Focus groups are helpful in getting some ideas on how the organization is working and what is happening and what could change. Once you do focus groups, you send out some survey, research questions covering what you learned from the focus groups to test the ideas. The qualitative research can give you a list of some issues that are relevant to staff, but often you would find that it gets skewed towards the more vocal people. So backing it up with quantitative research, such as an organization-wide questionnaire, can give you a feel for how widely held each belief is across the organization. We advise a multi-layered approach to creating an effective engagement program. This is about raising awareness, and employees can be influenced to change their behaviors through different channels. You can alter access to resources so that employees are influenced or encouraged to make more sustainable choices. Reducing car parking spaces and creating more bike racks and shower facilities will be an example to encourage cycling to work. You can also automate equipment and have instructions available to change default options, for example, for a printer. Building carbon into job specifications would help increase awareness and ensure responsibilities for carbon reduction are assigned. You can educate staff on best practice in energy and environmental management at work and explain how to use new technologies. And finally, receiving help and advice about energy saving at home can make employees feel their employer cares about them and their well-being. Helping employees with cost-saving measures at home can help relieve financial stress. The slide shows how you could think about some of the initiatives. So the bottom part, the bottom means that people don't have much control over their actions, and the top part, it's conscious decisions that people make, and the left side, that's reward, right side, and punish. So for example, the first one, well, you could ban localized heaters, and you could charge fines for computer monitors left on. So that would be smack. And you could reduce parking spaces and turn down air conditioning so that people don't have much choice, but you are disincentivizing them to drive more or just, yeah, I guess be cold or be hot. As I mentioned earlier, I mentioned about setting printers to double-sided. That's giving them a nudge that it's actually really good to it's not much of a hassle, or it's not that inconvenient to see 2 pages in one page. And you're giving employees a hug if you're making homeworking possible and convenient by introducing teleconferencing. Through behavior change campaign, you should try to make the hug part bigger. The other 3 are not employee engagement, technically. And the hug is allowing employees to make active, conscious decisions while being rewarded. This is just straightforward examples of employee engagement channels, emails, workshops, team meetings, etc. So this is essentially the summary of what we discussed so far. So these are 3 things that you have to think about when designing an employee engagement program. You have to remember that you have to set goals. Your targets have to be achievable, and you have to start small and create positive vibe about sustainability. And speak to senior management to get support for your initiatives. Speak to them about the many benefits for your initiatives would be bringing to the organization and to the culture. And behavior change does not happen overnight. You need to allocate resources and think about the time frames. So this is what I have. So now we're going to begin answering some questions submitted during the webinar. And we'll also be talking about Green Business Fund afterwards. We're just waiting to see. Okay. So it looks like we don't actually have that many inspiring questions. Let's see, where's this?
If anyone has any questions after the webinar, you can email them over. We'll be emailing a link to the webinar. If you get anything else that you'd like help with, Hannah can give you an email back. I'm just going to go through now some information about the ways that the Green Business Fund can help you with energy efficiency and with funding. So there are a range of ways that the Green Business Fund is able to help small and medium-sized companies and organisations. Part of this is through energy efficiency training. So we offer 2-hour workshops across the UK. These workshops outline energy efficient behaviour and equipment which can help you reduce your energy consumption. The next workshops are scheduled to run in September and October in Bath, Cambridge, Leominster and Chippenham. You can see them on the website as well if you're interested in attending any of those. The Green Business Fund also offers opportunity assessments and energy audits, and these can be remote or on-site visits depending on the size of your energy spend. The assessments outline the top 3 cost-saving recommendations for a business to take to become more energy efficient and to reduce their energy consumption. We also offer implementation advice, which helps you find Carbon Trust accredited suppliers for specific projects. And just finally, the Green Business Fund can offer a capital contribution to small and medium-sized businesses and organisations. And this fund can offer you 15% towards a project cost. This is up to a maximum of £5,000 and can be applied for any energy saving projects that you might have. The minimum project as well has to be £5,000 and the project should pay back within 5 years. If you'd like to apply, just head to the Carbon Trust website and you can find the Green Business Fund area. Just fill in a short application form and then we can get back to you with any further information. Do we have any questions that have just come in now for Hannah?
Yeah, we have a few, but I think some of them are not really, I guess, employee engagement on energy savings. So I'll try to, so I wouldn't really be able to answer. But I mean, so one question is about, so it's asking, how could you address negative comments when trying to begin a change in a workplace? So I think this is a pretty, I mean, yes, it could be about energy saving, you're trying to do something, but you're not getting very good positive feedback. Well, I guess, I mean, this is really, specific to your organization, and perhaps there is, past history, there's history that, that employee engagement didn't work very well. So I think I would probably start out by just learning more about what people are doing and why people are making those negative comments about good behaviors within the workplace related to energy management. So really, I think doing the research would help you formulate ideas and potential actions, because there are so many benefits that engagement brings to the workplace. And then, so let me just try to look at other questions here. When you're over the low-hanging fruit actions, like the examples you shared in the hug part, that ensure staff engagement for environmental gain, what's the next thing you can do? Can you give more examples of successful campaigns you have done, and why they were successful, and what challenges they faced at first? I think this is a bit of a hard question, actually, so I might have to come back to you on this. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm getting a lot of questions now, so I have a hard time actually digesting these. Some questions about green champions. It's an interesting question about green champions. Speaking of green champions, I assume they will have to be rewarded for their actions. In private organizations, rewards usually come in the form of money, vouchers, gifts. In public organizations, budgets are usually limited and subject to a long approval process. How can you reward green champions if your budget is limited or you have no money at all? Well, I think at the bottom of employee engagement, and green champion is one of the part of the engagement, is that it shouldn't cost money to the organization. I mean, yes, you could have resources such as energy manager who would cost the organization money, but the whole point of appointing a green champion is so that they become the point of contact and they disseminate those messages. So you don't have to think about really rewarding them financially, because otherwise, I mean, they are, I guess, getting sort of benefits from what they're doing by being a green champion. So, I would somehow, I wouldn't really think about this sort of vouchers and gifts and things like that for green champions. Okay. Can you recommend any specific carrot measures to improve waste separation apart from changing the lids? Any ideas? I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, this is, I guess, sort of related to what we discussed. I mean, for example, you could have, I think for waste management, you have to have different sorting bins. And for example, our offices have, a separate bin for tea bags, for example, and separate bins for recycling and waste, etc. So I think carrot measures, I think I have a hard time coming up with an example, but what you could do is, to use those bins where you actually have to use your foot to open the lid so that, I guess that sort of gives, just a bit more time for people to think about, whether that's the correct bin for you to throw your thing to. So that's one example. Yes, so we can certainly get a copy of the PowerPoint to you at the end of the webinar, and we also have a video recording available on YouTube and on the Carbon Trust website, right? Okay, right. Yeah. Okay. Great. I think that's it for today.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, we'll email out the recording of the webinar to you all. We'll also have a look at some of your questions that didn't get a chance to get answered today, and we'll email you with some more information about that as well. Thank you to everyone for attending today. And yeah, as I said, if you have any other questions, you can contact Hannah directly. I'll be sending out her email address with the presentation as well. So on behalf of the Carbon Trust and our presenter, thank you very much for joining us today and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.